Howdy, folks. It is Thursday, May 29th, and welcome back to another episode of TASB Talks, the podcast bringing you the latest happenings and insights into Texas public education. And I am joined, as always, by Docs Gonzalez, Division Director of TASB Governmental Relations. Docs, we are almost there, man. It's the countdown to Sine Die is on.
A few more days. I think it's about 5 more days from now. I'm glad you said what day it was today, because I have no idea, and neither does anyone at the TASB GR right now. We're making fun of ourselves yesterday for thinking it was like 2 days in the future, or 1 day in the past. We don't really know.
I know. Have y'all been when's the last time you saw any sunlight?
It's funny because we're so fixated on the calendar right now, looking at deadlines and things coming through, and yet we can't associate that calendar with real life time. So it's an interesting situation to be in. But we are almost there. Monday is Sine Die, and we're really looking forward to that.
Why do they call it that, by the way?
I have no idea. It's a Latin, word for probably dying at the end. I don't know. Okay. I really don't know, man. You'd think after about 20 years I'd have looked into it, but I'm just so happy that it's over. I really don't think past that.
No, that's fair enough. Hang in there a couple more days now, like 3 or 4, something like that. But in the meantime, we have been waiting on school funding bill, House Bill 2. Obviously, that's kind of been a big thing we've been waiting on. I think we had some movement on that last week. I think last Thursday it was second reading, then last Friday passed the Senate on third reading. So what are we waiting on with that bill?
We're waiting for the House to take action on it. The Senate has passed it over back to the House. And the House just has to either concur in the Senate amendments, or they have to assign a conference committee to negotiate any differences between the House and Senate bills. I will say that the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor and everyone, there was a statement that came out last week that signaled everyone's support for House Bill 2. So I can't imagine that they would assign a conference committee unless maybe there are some last minute details they need to fix. But I don't really see anything that there's contention between the House and Senate over that version of the bill. They had both chairs of the education committees on there. They had some other key legislators who worked on those differences between House Bill to the House version and the Senate version. So I expect it to be concurred with at some point, and they still have time to do that. We are running up against 2 really important deadlines. Friday is going to be the last day for the House to act on Senate amendments, and then, which means any House bills that they sent over to the Senate, and then the Senate bill changed them. Friday will be the last day that they can act on those, and then all conference committee reports. So if they don't agree with what the Senate did, or the Senate doesn't agree with what the House did, they can form a conference committee, which they take a few legislators from each House, and they have them work on a bill and then come out with an agreement, and then that goes back to the chambers to vote on. And the deadline for the House and Senate to act on those conference committee reports, which are basically the finalized negotiated bills, is, I believe, I just had it. I think it's Sunday that they can do that. So that is the next big deadline after Friday, and then the end is on Monday.
So just as a refresher, you mentioned a new version of House Bill 2. What does that look like now with all the changes?
Yeah, it's vastly different than what came out of the House, which was about a $400 increase to the basic allotment. And what the Senate did was they took a lot of the priorities that, I want to say the Senate, really they were working very closely with House members to get this through, but they took a lot of the priorities that they've heard from school board members and superintendents across the state, and built them into the bill, not necessarily through the basic allotment, but through separate allotments now. So the bill still moves about $8.5 billion into public education. $4.2 billion of that is through a teacher retention allotment, and we've talked about that in the past. It provides a stipend from anywhere between $2,500 and about $8,000 per teacher, depending on their tenure. So between 3 and 4 year teachers get a certain amount if you're in a smaller district versus a larger district, and those with more than 5 years or above get a little bit more. So So that's the main chunk of that 8.5 billion. There is about 500 million in there for other staff salaries, and that'll be a way to make sure that folks like your counselors, your librarians, your school bus drivers, your food service workers can get some kind of increase. And then there is also a new fixed cost allotment. I think they call it the ABC allotment, the allotment for basic costs. So they love good acronyms over there. And so that is to help districts pay for utilities, insurance costs, payroll taxes, those other things that the basic allotment would have been used for if they would have been given it an increase in the basic allotment. So so those are kind of the big chunks coming out of there. There's a lot of other things coming through, about $677 million for early education initiatives. Now that does come, that's kind of some new requirements coming out of the state. So that money's kind of dedicated. That's not free money to use where a district needs to use it. And then there is about $430 million for safety and security. That was a different bill that they rolled into there. And that's to increase the per student and per campus allotment. So it's a pretty robust bill. It's got a lot of different components in there. And I would just point out that there's you have $8.5 billion. It isn't through the basic allotment. There's a small basic allotment increase of $55 in there. But it is a negotiation where they feel that they're directing those funds to where they've heard are necessary items back home. And I should mention also that special education is also another one of those issues where they added significant funding. So so we'll see how that looks. And in 2 years, I'm sure there'll be a fix for it. There always is.
Well, so that behemoth of a bill you mentioned, all that's gone into that, all the work that's gone into that since the start of session, that is at the finish line. We expect that to make it there and then to pass fully,
hopefully,
and knock on wood. Mm-hmm. But we expect that to make it through. And so as we turn our attention now to other bills in the public education space that we are keeping an eye on here at the last minute, what are some other bills? I know you and I have talked. You've mentioned House Bill 6. So what does that bill do again, and what is the status of that one?
Yeah, so House Bill 6 is a student discipline overhaul. There's a lot in the bill. But just to go over just a couple of high-level things, it increases the amount of time the student can be placed in in-school suspension. And that is to help districts manage situations where maybe you have a kid who is perhaps a harm to somebody, and they can move them out of the classroom until they get things sorted out and take more time to do that. It also does remove the requirement that kids in possession or use of an e-cigarette have to be placed in a disciplinary alternative education program. Our members were telling us that their DAEPs were full of kids for that were caught with this with e-cigarettes or whatever, and they needed some more discretion in terms of freeing up space for kids who really needed to be in there, and maybe for first-time offenders they could deal with that through a different way. So it also makes some changes to when kids can be expelled, suspended, and things like that, removed from the classroom, and provisions around when they can come back to the classroom and kind of monitoring that situation moving forward. But that bill was the House yesterday concurred in the Senate amendments, so that is passed out of the legislature and will go on to the governor for his signature, or allow or veto or allow to pass without his signature. So that's that bill. There's also another bill that folks have been looking out for, is House Bill 4, which is the school accountability bill, and we're still working through that one because it's a pretty significant bill. But that was it was amended in the Senate, but if you listen to the layout, it still gets rid of the STAR exam and instead focuses on through-year testing, so norm reference tests that kind of track a child at the beginning, middle, and end of the school year to provide more immediate results for teachers to help them, work with kids in the areas they need to before the end of school. So, which is what happens now is that as a STAR test really captures the end. A lot of our members are doing beginning, middle, and end of year testing to, my kids take those tests, and educators find that a lot more useful than just one test at the end of the school year. So House Bill 4 has been passed off the Senate floor, and we're waiting for the House to either concur in those changes or to assign a conference committee to work on the differences between the two bills.
We'll see what happens over the next few days into the weekend with these bills as we kind of hit the finish line. And once we do reach the finish line, I know we want to have you back on in the next week or so to kind of do more of a general, larger recap episode. So all these bills we've discussed and other bills we're going to talk about, be sure to tune in sometime next week for the next episode of TASB Talks. And in the meantime, docs, well, first of all, we'll let you get some rest, hopefully maybe once we hit June 2nd, and then bring it back on. But thanks for being here as always. We appreciate not only the time you've taken today to be here, but all the time you've taken over the last several months now to give us an update on what's happening, because we need you and your team to explain a lot of this to us, because it can be a lot to unpack and a lot to go through.
Well, happy to help, and it's great. It's I love talking about it, and not so much living through it all the time, but talking about it is great. And we'll see. We, like I said, we have till Monday. And so we'll know basically on Sunday a lot of the things that are finalized. But and I do have to point out, there are a lot of things that can happen that are totally unrelated to public schools that kind of mess things up for a lot of those education bills. So a squabble over other issues can always bleed over into the final result of some of the bills that we're looking for. But hopefully we can get these done, finalized, and we can work in the interim to start implementing these things.
Absolutely. We'll keep our fingers crossed and hope that a lot of these legislators aren't too tired and too testy from being cooped up for so long, and we can get some of these bills passed, and then we can move on to the rest of our year, and then we can do it all again in 2027 and
1 year at a time.
1 year at a time. 1 year at a time. Well, docs, thanks again, and thank you all for tuning in, for listening on Apple and Spotify, and for watching on YouTube at TASB News. We appreciate y'all, and we'll see you next time.